Welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yes, welcome.
This time, we're tackling a topic that I think is both fascinating and a little mind-bending.
Yeah.
Psychedelics, creativity, and how it all connects to the brain.
Right.
We've got an amazing lineup of sources to unpack here.
Who you?
Like interviews with Rick Doblin, who, as you know, is the founder of MAPS, Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's doing such groundbreaking work in neuroscience these days, and even some super creative folks like Reggie Watts, the musician and comedian.
Amazing Reggie Watts.
And to round it all out, we're going to be pulling in some insights from medical channels and channels that focus on addiction.
Interesting.
So we're really getting a pretty broad perspective here.
It's amazing to me to see such a diverse group of people all coming together to talk about this topic.
Right.
Especially given all the historical baggage that psychedelics carry.
It's like we're rediscovering this whole world of potential, that was kind of pushed aside or even demonized for decades. So what we're really trying to dig into here is how psychedelics actually influence creativity.
Oh?
Is it really possible that a tiny molecule can boost your creative output?
Right.
Or is it all just like a placebo effect? Are we tricking ourselves into thinking we're more creative?
Interesting.
And then beyond the individual creative process, we're going to be diving into some pretty big questions about how psychedelics could impact society as a whole.
Yeah, some really big questions.
Could they be part of the solution for treating PTSD?
It's a possibility.
Could they help us address things like racism and police brutality? It's kind of mind-blowing to even think about.
It really is.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a step back.
Yeah.
It's easy to think of psychedelics as something that came out of the 60s counterculture.
Oh, for sure.
But their use actually goes back way further.
Oh, yeah. Way, way back.
We're talking ancient civilizations here.
Right, like ancient.
Ancient. One example that comes to mind are the Eleusinian mysteries.
Oh, wow. Okay.
These were these secret rituals in ancient Greece that went on for centuries.
Centuries.
Yeah. And people would participate in these ceremonies that involved this special drink called kykeon. Kykeon.
Interesting.
And historians believe that this drink probably contains psychoactive ingredients.
Oh.
And the whole point of these mysteries was to confront your own mortality and find meaning in life.
Wow, so it's really fascinating.
It makes you wonder, right? How were psychedelics so intertwined with spirituality and self-exploration way back then?
Absolutely.
But as Rick Doblin points out, the Catholic Church ended up suppressing these rituals around the 4th century.
Okay.
And this historical context is really important.
Yeah.
Because it shows that there's been this tension surrounding psychedelics for a really long time.
It's like a push and pull.
Yeah, and Doblin argues that we're still dealing with the consequences of that suppression today.
It makes sense.
But luckily, there's a huge resurgence of interest happening now.
Yeah, it feels like a really exciting time.
Fueled by all the new research that's coming out and this growing awareness of the potential benefits. So yeah, it's really cool to see how the conversation is evolving.
It is.
And with all this renewed interest, there's also a push to understand the science behind it all. Like how do psychedelics actually work on the brain?
Well, that's the key question, right?
Exactly. And a lot of people might be surprised to learn just how similar a molecule like LSD is to something that our brains already produce.
Oh, really?
Yeah, serotonin.
Wow, interesting.
I know, right?
I wouldn't have thought of that.
Serotonin plays such a huge role in our mood, how we perceive things, even our social behavior.
So many things.
I mean, it's essential.
Yeah.
And LSD basically mimics serotonin by binding to the same receptors in the brain.
So they're like similar shapes.
Yeah, kind of like a key fitting into a lock.
Okay, yeah.
But here's the big difference. Okay.
LSD hangs on to those receptors for much longer than serotonin does.
Interesting.
And that leads to this cascade of unusual effects.
So it's not just about replacing serotonin, right?
No, exactly.
It's about kind of like throwing a wrench into the whole system.
Yeah, disrupting the normal flow of things.
I see.
And one area of the brain that LSD seems to really mess with is the default mode network.
The default mode network.
It sounds kind of ominous, right?
Yeah, like it's something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does. What's going on there?
Well, it might sound a little intimidating,
Yeah.
but it's actually a pretty natural part of how our brains work.
Okay.
It's basically a group of brain regions that's most active when we're not focused on any specific task.
Like when our minds are wandering.
Exactly, like daydreaming, self-reflection.
Okay.
You could say it plays a big part in shaping our sense of self.
Wow. So psychedelics are kind of like shaking up the very part of our brain that helps us define who we are. Exactly. And that's why people often describe these experiences of ego dissolution, like a feeling of oneness with the universe.
Oh.
Or a blurring of the lines between self and other.
That's intense.
These can be incredibly powerful experiences, even mystical for some people.
Yeah.
But for others, they can also be disorienting, maybe even frightening.
Yeah, it makes sense that messing with something as fundamental as our sense of self would have such a wide range of effects.
Absolutely.
But this disruption might be doing more than just changing our perceptions in the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have Dr. Gould Dulin, a neuroscientist who's doing some really groundbreaking research on how psychedelics could actually impact the brain's plasticity.
Plasticity?
Yeah, its ability to change and adapt over time.
Interesting.
Her research focuses on this fascinating concept called critical periods.
Critical periods, okay.
Yeah, these are like windows of time in our brain development where we're primed for learning and forming new connections in our brains.
So like specific times when our brains are more receptive to certain types of information.
Exactly. The classic example is language acquisition in early childhood.
Yeah, like we're sponges.
We soak up information like crazy.
Right.
So are you saying that there's a specific window for learning certain things?
Well, it might not be as black and white as we once thought.
Okay.
Dr. Dolan's research actually suggests that psychedelics could potentially reopen these critical periods.
What?
Even in adulthood.
Wait, so we might not be stuck with the neural pathways we developed in childhood?
That's what the research is suggesting.
You're telling me our brains are more adaptable than we thought?
It seems so.
Wow, that's like getting a second chance at learning and growing.
It really is fascinating research.
This is incredible.
And it challenges our assumptions about how fixed our brains really are.
Yeah, I'm starting to rethink everything I thought I knew about the brain.
It's a very exciting area of research, for sure.
It is. But let's not lose sight of our main focus here. Creativity. We've delved into the historical use of psychedelics, the brain science. But what about the actual creative process itself?
That's the core of it all, right?
Like, how do these substances actually impact the way artists and musicians work?
Well, that's what we'll explore next.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's shift gears and hear from some of the creatives themselves.
Yeah, let's do it.
To kick things off, we have a fascinating perspective from Rick Rubin.
Okay.
The legendary music producer who's worked with everyone from the Beastie Boys to Adele.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he's a legend.
And what's interesting is that he's famously avoided drugs and alcohol his entire life.
What?
Even while being immersed in the music industry.
That's wild.
He actually credits his creative process to a deep sense of inner confidence.
Wow. So he's living proof that sobriety can be a powerful creative fuel in its own right.
It seems so.
That's pretty inspiring, considering the stereotype of the drug-fueled artist.
It definitely challenges that myth.
Yeah, for sure.
But then we have someone like Reggie Watts, who describes his first LSD experience as revealing the silliness of the universe.
Whoa.
And that directly impacted his improvisational style.
Interesting.
So he seems to have embraced a totally different path to creative expression.
Okay, so now we have sobriety on one end of the spectrum.
Right.
And psychedelic exploration on the other.
A stark contrast.
Talk about a contrast. Where does that leave us?
Well, that's a good question. Are we talking about a black and white situation here, or is there more nuance to it?
It's definitely more nuanced than that.
Okay.
David Kushner, a journalist who's written a lot about the connection between drugs and creativity, argues that many artists actually turn to substances out of fear.
Fear?
Yeah, and a lack of sobriety skills.
So it's not about, like, unlocking some hidden creative potential.
Not necessarily.
More about self-medicating to cope with the anxieties of the creative process.
That's what he suggests.
That makes you wonder how much of that creative boost we attribute to drugs is actually just a way of masking deeper insecurities. It's a good point.
Right. And this leads us to James Taylor, who's a creativity expert, and he takes a more measured approach.
Okay.
He suggests that stimulants like caffeine or amphetamines can be helpful for certain types of outward-directed creative work.
Outward-directed, okay.
Like writing or composing.
Interesting.
But they can actually hinder those aha moments of insight.
So breakthroughs.
Exactly. Which often come from a more relaxed and receptive state of mind.
Makes sense.
So it's like different substances might be suited to different phases of the creative process.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Not at all.
And then, to round out the discussion, we have the perspective from the Addiction Mindset channel.
Okay.
They argue that long-term cannabis use can actually stifle creativity over time.
Oh, wow. How so?
Well, they say it's because cannabis disrupts REM sleep,
Okay.
which is the stage of sleep where dreaming occurs, and dreaming is often a source of creative inspiration.
So that creative high you might feel when you're high on cannabis
Right.
could actually be deceiving you in the long run.
Exactly. Maybe you're not generating more ideas.
Yeah.
You're just more easily impressed by your own thoughts.
It's a possibility.
So, yeah, it seems like the relationship between psychedelics and creativity is way more complicated than we might initially think.
Absolutely. There are potential benefits and risks, and the impact can vary wildly from person to person,
Right.
depending on the substance, the context, so many factors.
Yeah, for sure.
So we've explored this whole web of individual creative experiences,
Yeah,
but how do we even start to navigate all of this responsibly?
right.
Like, if these substances really do hold therapeutic potential, how do we make sure they're being used safely and ethically?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah, it is.
And we'll be digging into that further in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll be exploring the potential of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for treating PTSD, especially for veterans and police officers.
Okay.
And we'll also be unpacking this really crucial concept of set and setting, which basically means that the environment and your mindset play a huge role in shaping your psychedelic experience.
It makes sense.
I'm also really interested in hearing more about the ethical considerations,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to using psychedelics to try and address societal issues like racism.
That's a big one.
It can't be as simple as, like, giving everyone a dose of MDMA and expecting the world to magically transform, right?
Definitely not.
There's got to be more to it than that.
There's a lot of nuance and potential pitfalls to consider.
Yeah, for sure.
But for now, let's take a break and regroup.
Okay, go.
We'll pick up this conversation in part 2.
See you there.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into psychedelics, creativity, and the brain.
Yeah, it's great to be back.
Last time we left off talking about how psychedelics interact with the brain.
We did.
We even heard from Reggie Watts about how LSD influenced his comedy.
Yeah, his style is so unique.
Talk about thinking outside the box, right?
Absolutely.
But as we discussed, there's also a potential dark side.
Right.
The possibility of misuse, addiction, and the myth that substances are the only path to creativity.
It's a complex landscape for sure.
So today, I'm really interested in exploring the healing potential of psychedelics,
Okay.
especially when it comes to PTSD.
Yeah, that's a huge area of research right now.
Like, can these substances, when used in a safe and controlled setting, actually help people process trauma?
It's a big question, and there's growing evidence that they can.
Really?
Yeah. And it's interesting how this challenges the traditional model of therapy.
That's what I find so fascinating about this whole topic. It's like we're questioning everything we thought we knew about healing and the brain.
We heard from Saro Jaramillo, who's a police lieutenant and a psychotherapist.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he's really advocating for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy to be used in law enforcement.
That's pretty groundbreaking.
It is.
I mean, think about the potential impact.
Yeah.
If officers could approach situations with less fear and more compassion.
It could really change the dynamics between law enforcement and the community.
It's almost like reframing the whole approach to policing.
Exactly.
But is there actual evidence that MDMA can create these shifts in perspective?
There is. Research shows that MDMA can foster feelings of safety and trust.
So people can revisit traumatic memories without being completely overwhelmed by fear or anxiety.
That's the idea. It allows them to process those memories in a healthier way.
That's amazing. It's such a different approach than traditional talk therapy.
Right. It's not about suppressing the trauma. It's about working through it.
It's like you're giving people the tools to confront their demons head on.
In a safe and supported environment.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the importance of set and setting.
Right. That concept is crucial.
Like, just giving someone MDMA isn't a magic bullet.
No. The environment, the therapist's guidance, and the individual's mindset.
All those things play a huge role in shaping the experience.
It's almost like the difference between hearing a symphony in a concert hall versus listening to a recording on your headphones.
I like that analogy.
The music might be the same, but the overall experience is completely different.
So set and setting create the container for the psychedelic journey.
And that container can make all the difference between a profound healing experience and one that could be unsettling or even re-traumatizing.
So even with therapeutic use, there's still a lot of preparation involved.
Absolutely. And integration afterward is crucial too.
These substances are powerful tools, not quick fixes.
Right. And that leads us to the ethical considerations.
Especially when people talk about using psychedelics to address societal issues like racism.
It's tempting to think just give everyone MDMA and the world will become a utopia.
Right, but we've seen how context matters with individual healing.
Exactly. It's not that simple.
So how would that even translate to something as complex and ingrained as prejudice?
Well, Rick Doblin makes a really important point.
Okay.
He says that if someone already holds prejudiced beliefs, a psychedelic experience might just amplify those biases.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
It could be like giving a microphone to someone who's already shouting hateful messages.
That's a powerful image.
We also can't forget the cultural context.
Right. Psychedelics have deep roots in many indigenous cultures.
Where they've been used for centuries as part of spiritual and healing practices.
Exactly. We can't just impose a Western medical model on something with such a rich history.
It's about respecting those traditions and learning from them.
So we've talked about responsible use on an individual level, but it sounds like there's a whole other layer when you start talking about societal applications.
It's a much bigger conversation.
And there's also the potential for exploitation, right?
Definitely. If psychedelics become a billion-dollar industry.
Which seems likely.
Who's to say they won't be marketed as a quick fix for deep-seated societal issues without addressing the underlying causes?
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Exactly. It might look better on the surface, but you haven't actually solved the problem.
And we can't forget the potential for harm either.
Right. As we've discussed, these experiences can be very powerful, even destabilizing.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
It's like fire.
Fire.
A powerful tool that can be used to cook a delicious meal or burn down your house.
Depending on how you handle it.
Exactly.
So with all these considerations in mind, where do we go from here?
That's the big question, isn't it?
We've explored the potential benefits, the risks, the ethical dilemmas.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
How do we move forward responsibly?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the potential for mainstreaming psychedelics.
Okay.
The need for education and regulation, and the role of personal responsibility in shaping the future of this rapidly evolving field.
It sounds like we have a lot more to uncover.
We do, and I'm really looking forward to digging deeper.
All right, let's jump into part 3. Welcome back to our deep dive. It feels like we've gone down the rabbit hole here with psychedelics.
Yeah, we've covered so much ground.
From ancient history to the latest research and all these incredible stories of how these substances can impact people's lives.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating journey.
So now I think the big question is, where do we go from here?
Right. What does the future hold for psychedelics?
Are we on the verge of like a psychedelic revolution?
It really does feel like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
On one hand, there's this growing acceptance of psychedelics, driven by research, advocacy, and even just a shift in cultural attitudes.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the momentum building.
Rick Doblin, for instance, seems pretty convinced that we're moving toward mainstream psychedelic psychotherapy.
Really?
He even believes that FDA approval for MDMA-assisted therapy is on the horizon.
Wow, that's huge.
Imagine a world where therapists can actually prescribe MDMA to help people heal from trauma.
It's a powerful thought.
Think about the veterans struggling with PTSD, or even police officers dealing with the emotional toll of their jobs.
It could be life-changing for so many people.
It's a really compelling vision.
It is.
But as we've discussed, it's not as simple as just making these substances widely available.
Right. There's a lot more to it than that.
There's a huge need for education, both for the public and for the professionals who would be working with these powerful tools.
We're talking about a complete paradigm shift.
It's like trying to undo decades of fear-mongering and misinformation.
Exactly.
People need to understand the potential benefits, the risks, the importance of set and setting.
Right, and the need for integration, too.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
And we need to make sure that any therapeutic use is grounded in solid research, ethical guidelines, and a deep understanding of just how complex these substances are.
You can't just jump into this blindly.
It's like handing someone a powerful new piece of technology without a user manual.
Yeah, a good analogy.
It could be incredibly beneficial,
yeah,
but also potentially dangerous if it's misused.
So how do we strike that balance?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
We also have to consider the potential for commercialization and exploitation.
Right. What happens when psychedelics become a billion-dollar industry?
Will they still be used responsibly?
Or will they be marketed as a cure-all, a quick fix for problems that run much deeper?
I worry about that.
There's a real risk of reducing these profound experiences to just another commodity.
We've seen that happen with so many things in our culture.
Yeah, it's a valid concern.
And that brings us to the question of personal responsibility.
Absolutely.
Even if psychedelics become legal and easily accessible, it's crucial that individuals approach them with respect, caution, and a clear intention.
I couldn't agree more.
It's about understanding the power they hold and using them wisely.
It's like any powerful tool or technology, really.
Yeah.
It can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
And ultimately, the responsibility lies with the user.
We can't just outsource that to some authority figure or corporation.
It's about taking ownership of our own choices.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways we want to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think first and foremost, the science of psychedelics is advancing at an incredible pace.
It's amazing to see how much we're learning.
We're gaining a much deeper understanding of how these substances impact the brain, consciousness, and behavior.
It feels like a whole new frontier of scientific exploration.
There's so much more to learn, and it's exciting to see where the research leads.
Absolutely.
Second, there's clearly immense therapeutic potential here.
Yeah, we've seen the evidence.
But we have to proceed with caution.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be approached responsibly with an emphasis on setting, integration, and ethical considerations.
Not just throwing psychedelics at every problem.
Right. It's about using them thoughtfully and intentionally.
For the right reasons and in the right way.
Exactly.
And third, I think we have to acknowledge that the future of psychedelics is uncertain.
It is. There are a lot of unknowns.
But there's reason for both optimism and caution.
There's potential for profound healing and growth, both on an individual and a societal level.
But there's also a risk of misuse, exploitation, and harm if we're not careful.
So we need to proceed with wisdom and awareness.
What's the final thought we want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious.
Okay.
To keep asking questions.
Yeah.
And to engage in thoughtful discussions about these complex issues.
Because ultimately, the future of psychedelics is in our hands collectively.
It's up to all of us to shape it responsibly.
That's a powerful message.
It's a shared responsibility.
Maybe, just maybe, these once demonized substances can help us unlock new levels of creativity, healing, and understanding.
Not just for ourselves,
but for society as a whole.
It's a beautiful possibility.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you plenty to think about.
Absolutely. And we encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating topic.